Good evening. It's my great pleasure to warmly welcome all of you to this very special session on Central Asia, where we will have the second talk of the Exploring Central Asia talk series, organized by the Tillotoma Foundation. Over the years, Central Asia has been a crucial focus area of the Foundation, manifested through a large number of initiatives in this region. The Exploring Central Asia Talk series is a similar initiative by the Foundation, where we have leading experts on Central Asia talk about the pressing issues related to the region. The second talk of the series will be on the topic Geopolitics and Regional Integration in Central Asia. The talk will be delivered by senior expert from Central Asia, Dr. Farkhad Tolipov, visiting senior coordinator of Central Asia of Tillotoma Foundation, and director of Billion Karboni, Uzbekistan. The session will be chaired by Dr. Kamakshi Wason, Chief Operating Officer and Director of Academic Programs of the Tillotoma Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. Let me now request Dr. Wason to kindly deliver the opening remarks and begin with the session.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tulika, for the welcome address. This is a special lecture session on the theme of geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia, as a part of the Exploring Central Asia talk series organized by the Tillotoma Foundation. I'm Kamakshi Wason, Chief Operating Officer and Director of Academic Programs, Tillotoma Foundation. Tillotoma Foundation works globally in the areas of international relations, diplomacy, area studies, gender, environmental, scientific, strategic, and defense policy. The Eurasian region, particularly Central Asia, has been an important focus area of the Foundation. We have a dedicated West and Central Asia Center at the Tillotoma Foundation. Over the years, the Foundation has actively cooperated with and worked with institutions, senior experts, and diplomats from Central Asia. The Foundation has also organized several high-level Track 2 diplomatic conclaves and major international seminars on Central Asia. Today, we are here to discuss the prospects of regional integration in Central Asia and discuss the recent developments in this region and their impacts on regional and international security. As you are aware, the region has witnessed a significant transformation in the last 10 years, both economically and politically. Despite the significant progress, the regional integration process has not been able to achieve its full potential because of various issues which have remained unresolved till now. These issues include the disagreements among the Central Asian countries regarding the shape of the regional economic integration process, issues related to mutual security and strategic cooperation, territorial disputes among some of the countries in the region, and various other challenges. All these issues are adversely affecting the process of regional integration and obstructing the development of these countries. Despite all these impediments, the Central Asian countries are determined to pursue the path of regional cooperation and work towards overcoming the existing hurdles. Towards this end, they are exploring various options to achieve greater integration in the region. I'm sure our speaker for today will talk in detail about this. I'm sure we will have an in-depth, pertinent discussion on today's theme of this session, geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia. I'm pleased to welcome our distinguished speaker for today, Dr. Farkhad Tolipov, who is a senior fellow for Central Asian Studies at the Tillotoma Foundation. He joins us from Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Thank you, Dr. Tolipov, for being here today to speak on this very relevant and interesting topic. It is so great to see you and hear from you again. I would now like to request Dr. Tolipov to start with this address. Over to you, Dr. Tolipov.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamakshi Wason. I'm so glad to be here again. It's some time. It's already maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 year past since we were involved in another project and we met via Zoom for different other discussions. And now time has come for this session. Thank you very much for kindly inviting me to present the topic geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia. Well, in order to save myself from deviating to different related and unrelated issues, I prepared initial thesis for text. Maybe I will just briefly read this text and share with you my opinions about geopolitics and integration. And later, if you have any questions, we will discuss more informally maybe. So let me begin the text. So colleagues, the topic is geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia. Well, let me start with statement with this argument that geopolitics and regional integration are interlinked phenomena nowadays. More precisely, regional integration itself, I mean, when it applies to Central Asia, became a geopolitical phenomenon. I mean, regional integration itself in Central Asia is a geopolitical phenomenon. Although integration as such is a value in itself, since unification of nations is always a positive process, reflecting their friendship and closer cooperation, now integration of Central Asian nations bears implicit and explicit geopolitical dimension, not only normative one. Well, since the onset of independence in 1991, as you know, the region has developed in the permanent context of great power geopolitics. We often discussed, I mean, throughout independence period, we often discussed about competition and a rivalry between the United States, Russian Federation, China, and other powers. Even the old concept of great game was recalled in overall political and scholarly discourse. We always use the terminology of balance of power, sphere of influence, pressure, and so on. Meanwhile, the new phase of Central Asian geopolitics has been unfolding since recently. The tools, dynamics, and implications of the new phase are reflected in such terminology as hybrid war, proxy, fake news, propaganda, gas geopolitics, labor migration blackmail, and etc. Moreover, we cannot help considering all these processes without due account of war in Ukraine. The war has an existential importance for the entire former Soviet space, not only Ukraine or Russia, which has already experienced geopolitical transformation throughout more than 30 years. During this period, Russia lost its dominance and sphere of influence in almost all former Soviet space, from Baltic states to Caucasus. Central Asia probably became the last bastion for Russia to fix its imperial posture in the former Soviet space. Well, let me briefly describe how Russia does this, how Russia tries to preserve its geopolitical status. Central Asia probably is the last region, last portion of the former Soviet space where Russia tries to preserve its geopolitical status as the neo-empire or something like this. I will give you just a couple of examples to testify this statement. I mean, for example, in December 2021, a Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs issued the ultimatum, which was addressed to NATO and the United States. According to this ultimatum, both US and NATO, or NATO countries individually, should not be engaged with former Soviet republics, specifically with the Central Asian countries in different military spheres or subspheres. I mean, Russia wanted NATO and the United States, cancel or reject any possible military cooperation with Central Asian countries, be them military exercises or procurement of techniques or weapons or deployment of bases or whatever. Well, as we know, both NATO and the United States rejected such an ultimatum, such a demand on the part of Russia. So this single case ultimatum also reveals once again that Russia considers the former Soviet space as its own sphere of influence. It sounded, I mean, this ultimatum sounded like a Russian version of the Monroe Doctrine in the former Soviet territory. Well, today, or better to say, since onset of independence period 1991 until today, Russia has undertaken a number of other steps in order to save or preserve this space, former Soviet space, in its own orbit. In particular, Moscow tried to create some structures, organizations, which would reflect its geopolitical dominance and provide some umbrella, let's say, for Central Asian countries. These organizations are CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, CIS itself, Commonwealth of Independent States, which was created right after the collapse of the Soviet Union in December 1991. In 2015, the Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU briefly, was created, where two of Central Asian countries are members, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Others are Russia, Belarus, and Armenia. Well, besides these structures, Russia also strengthens nowadays bilateral diplomacy. I mean, number of high-ranking officials from Moscow visit Central Asian countries, in particular, my country, Uzbekistan, in order to, let's say, refresh the overall cooperative ties and even offer some new projects which hide some elements of geopolitics and so on. Regarding the CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States, although it has a long history, let's say more than 30 years, it appeared to be so dysfunctional. So CIS is not efficient and I would say irrelevant for former Soviet republics. Regarding bilateral diplomacy, let me mention at least one case. In November last year, the Speaker of State Duma of the Russian Federation, Vyacheslav Volodin, visited Tashkent and met with parliamentarians and President of Uzbekistan in Tashkent. And during his visit, he made, I would say, quite strange statement, official statement. Let me just quote a couple of sentences from his statement. It's like a long text, even available online, and it's posted even in the website of the State Duma. For instance, he said, Uzbekistani population and the government are wise enough to, objectively, I just try to translate from the Russian text, to objectively evaluate the overall consequences of possible cooperation with the United States. So you see the message. Also, he mentioned that the United States pressure or overall cooperation with Europe also bears some consequences for European economy as well. He said, another statement which I think has a quite deviating or misleading character was that we, Russia, he said, and Uzbekistan have common history. We have common traditional values, common culture. I think this is not a correct statement. I would even say, with maybe some exaggeration, that there is nothing common in history, traditional values, value system, and culture. Although we had some periods of living in one state, Soviet Union, this doesn't mean at all that we have a common history, common traditional values, especially common culture. Moreover, he ended in his statement with a quite provocative statement that the United States wants to exert pressure on us, on Uzbekistan, on Uzbek society and the state, and enforce specific ties with the United States, and wants to create, these are his words, wants to not create, destroy our traditional family and enforce their own American values. And he said that everybody understands this intention on the part of the United States. I think these kind of statements are quite, on one hand misleading, wrong, and on the other hand provocative. Anyway, Russian official media, expert circles still believe in the idea that Russia now is a dominant power in the former Soviet space and should, maintain such a posture in this space. And even this idea is very often propagated in Russia, that Russia should be a mediator. This is the key word, mediator, in different conflicts between and among Central Asians. So for the sake of conflict resolution in Central Asia, the idea is articulated constantly that Russia could be a mediator. Another example of new geopolitics, let's say, or new version of geopolitics is reflected in the magic, I would say, formula C5+1. Many powers, great powers, such as United States, European Union, Russia, China, and some remoter countries such as South Korea, Japan, India, including, and Turkey themselves have such, their own version and formulation of this, what I call geopolitical arithmetics, C5+1. C5+1 means briefly that 5 Central Asian countries, C5, are engaged with one power outside the region, like EU or US, and so on. And these powers, pursue their own regional policy, regional strategy in Central Asia. But the more I analyze the implications of the C5+1, how this formula and this doctrine, let's say, formulated by Russian side, US side, Chinese side, and others, the more I realize that this arithmetic formula has different solutions. C5+1 equal to different numbers, different outcomes, I would say. Well, depending on which angle on the ever-shifting triangle, for instance, in particular, China, Russia, and the US, we are looking for. For instance, let me symbolically express this in the following arithmetical formula. C5+1 can be 5, is equal to 5 in American version, which means that 5+1 is 5, that Central Asia has self-value. So American strategy, American doctrine about Central Asia is that the US is fully supportive of regional integration, regional cooperation, and the unity of Central Asia. That's why for Central Asia, it's 5. In Russian interpretation, let's say, from Russian angle, 5+1 is equal to 1, which in turn means that Russia sees Central Asia only under Russian umbrella, nothing more, nothing less. Central Asia should be under Russian umbrella as one whole. Russia plus Central Asia, all of them are one single entity, let's say. 5+1 for China. It's interesting. It's a bit amazing physics. 5+1 for Chinese version is equal to X, because Chinese strategy can be formulated, in my opinion, as live and see. Nothing clear. Well, something is vague, ambiguous, live and see. Take, for instance, India. My interpretation of C5 plus 1 for India is 5 plus 1 is equal 5 plus 1. It means, well, let's formulate it like, let's cooperate together. You are 5, we are 1. Let's leave it like this. 5 plus 1 is equal to 5 plus 1. So by summarizing different interpretations, different versions, scenarios of 5 plus 1, I would propose my own version of 5 plus 1 for Central Asia, Central Asian concept, Central Asian version of C5 plus 1, which is C5 plus 0. It should be 0. C5, it means Central Asian countries should realize, undertake their own independent model of regional integration without any other powers, extra-regional powers domination, hegemony in Central Asia. There is another specific interpretation of this formula. For some individual skeptics, there are skeptics of Central Asian regionalism and regional integration. There is 5 plus 1, which is 0. It means that neither 5, no 1 can do something in Central Asia because Central Asia is nothing or doesn't exist as a region. So that's why no need, or it's useless to advance any 5 plus 1 formula, and it will be just, the result will be just 0. Well, this is briefly, of course, about geopolitics, or the new stage of geopolitics in Central Asia. Briefly, let me say a few words about integration, regional integration in Central Asia. And I would like to mention, like in a chronological sequence, some interesting trends which we observe today since several years. For instance, in July 2021, the high-level international conference on Central Asia, South Asia connectivity was held in Tashkent. The central idea of the conference was creation of the railroad connecting Uzbekistan and in general Central Asia through Afghanistan and Pakistan with the Indian Ocean. This was an integrative effort, let's say. According to such a concept, Central Asia is considered as a single region, and South Asia also as a region. And this conference was about inter-regional, not international, not interstate, but inter-regional connectivity. So it means that, among other things, this conference also was a message to the international community that Central Asia advances some projects based on the regional self-identity, let's say. You may know that since 2018, Central Asian countries are engaged in so-called consultative meetings of presidents, annual consultative meetings of presidents, and every year since March 2018, since March 2018, 4 consultative meetings took place already. It means that 5 Central Asian presidents met together every year to discuss Central Asian regional affairs, Central Asian regional integration. First meeting was in March 2018 in Astana. Second meeting of presidents was in Tashkent, November 2019. 2020, it was a break because it was planned for Bishkek, but unfortunately in September, October that year in Kyrgyzstan, there were political turbulences, and that's why meeting was postponed. The third meeting took place in Turkmenistan, the place which is called Avaza, in 2021 in August. And finally, the fourth consultative meeting took place in July last year, 2022, in Cholponata town of Kyrgyzstan. Let me tell you that, briefly, that in every consultative meeting, presidents adopt the so-called joint statement. If you open those documents, joint statement, you can find very interesting messages, very interesting provisions of those statements. In particular, almost each document contains a special statement, I would say, about fraternity, fraternal relations, brethren relations, good neighborhood of Central Asian countries. So the forum itself, I mean, consultative meeting itself is a kind of a prototype of regional integration. Um, in particular, take for instance, July last year, Cholpanata meeting, fourth meeting of 5 Central Asian countries, in which for the first time they adopted a special document, which is called state, no, sorry, yeah, the treaty on friendship, good neighborhoods, and cooperation for the sake of development of Central Asia in the 21st century. This was very interesting document by name, by title, and by content. Again, this was a treaty, which is, of course, by the status of the document, much more important and higher than the traditional, let's say, joint statement. Um, although it was a very serious, I mean, bold step towards regional unification, regional cooperation of Central Asian countries, it wasn't without some, problems, some, it's not force majeure, but I would say some frictions in the process. That's why I evaluate this fourth summit as one step forward and half step back, because some strange things happened during this fourth consultative meeting. In particular, the president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, proposed that for the fifth consultative meeting, representatives from Russia and from China could be invited. So it means that they can be present during the summit. It was unexpected statement, unexpected proposal, which reminded me similar case, which was long ago. In 2004, Russia applied for the then CACO organization membership. CACO was Central Asia Cooperation Organization, and Central Asian countries didn't say no. Russia was admitted to CACO, and in a year after this membership, I mean 2005, CACO itself was, sacrificed in favor of the then Eurasian Economic Community. So Eurasian Economic Community, Евразес in Russian, and the CACO were merged together with the preservation of the name Eurasian Economic Community, Евразес. Since then, CACO doesn't exist. So the original format just disappeared with the membership of Russia. That's why proposal by Tokayev to invite Russian representatives and Chinese representatives to Central Asian format to the next fifth consultative meeting was strange. It sounded surprising for me, absolutely irrelevant. I hope this year for the fifth consultative meeting, which will be in Dushanbe, capital of Tajikistan, they will reconsider this proposal, and it will be just solely a bilateral meeting without participation of any other representatives. Regarding some other examples, other interesting, turns in regional integration process, a couple of other events also and trends deserve special attention. In particular, in December last year, quite unique treaty was signed between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Presidents Mirziyoyev and Tokayev signed a treaty on alliance relationships. It means from now on, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are allies. It's a very special type of relationships, even higher by status, by significance, by implications than strategic partnership. Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan are strategic partners. I mean, the document was signed long ago by Karimov and Nazarbayev, first presidents, in 2013. But in December 2022, last year, they became allies. So they signed the Treaty on Alliance Relationships. Another interesting event which happened just a couple of days ago, last week, in January this year, 2023, Mirziyoyev made a state visit to Kyrgyzstan. And in the wake of that visit, well, a huge package of agreements was adopted, and well, they achieved quite high level of strategic partnership. And in particular, imagine for the first time they announced that there is, I mean, no more border issues remain. I mean, all the border line delimitation and demarcation of borderline was resolved. Nothing left unresolved. This is first breakthrough. Another one is, and I am finishing, was that for citizens of Uzbekistan visiting Kyrgyzstan, or citizens of Kyrgyzstan visiting Uzbekistan, they will no longer need any passport, and the border guards will not put stamps during, I mean, at the moment of crossing the border. So everything will be digitalized, and that's why it means that actually there is no visa regime actually, and they will not put any stamp on visa. Even such type of agreements was not, adopted even between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, allies. So that's why it was a really big breakthrough. I finished my discussion in a small, short thesis about geopolitics and integration, and would like to finish with a couple of, several conclusions and maybe recommendations to discuss with you, maybe if you find them interesting. First, on geopolitics, geopolitical bloc. Eurasian Economic Union is incompatible with Central Asia. Uzbekistan's position, Kazakhstan's position, Kyrgyzstan's position on Eurasian Economic Union should be deeply analyzed. And I know that Kazakhstani experts, analysts are disappointed with the Kazakhstan's membership in the EA-EU. Uzbekistan is not yet a member, it's an observer. And I think Uzbekistan should learn the lessons Kazakhstanis and Kyrgyzstanis take from their membership. Zbigniew Brzezinski, the American thinker, politician, and political scientist, once made a prediction that Eurasian Economic Union will not live more than 10 years. Live and see. Second, I think withdrawal of countries of Central Asia from dysfunctional CIS, Commonwealth of the United States, would be the first step, first brave step, I would say, of Central Asian states. For instance, Ukraine, one of the three founders of the CIS, is no longer the member, as you can understand. Moldova is going to leave it. Georgia left many years ago. Russia and Belarus themselves created another union state. So no need in CIS any longer, I think. Third, Russian propaganda programs on TV should be blocked. And that would be the second brave step of Central Asian states. Actually, this is a very easy, simple, understandable from political point of view, and realistic measure, which even should not irritate Russia. However, even this simple step is not undertaken yet. Moldova and Azerbaijan can be example. They did this already. Complex of a weak state. This is another argument which I would like to advance. Is so specific for Central Asia. They suffer, let's say, from this complex of a weak state. What I mean by complex of a weak state, I mean that they feel themselves a priori so weak, so miserable, so fragile in front of great powers, so unable to say no when it is relevant to say no, and say yes when it's in their interest to say yes. They always feel themselves as weak, fragile, unable to say no if it is expedient to say no. For instance, Azerbaijan and Ukraine today demonstrate that they have overcome this complex of a weak state. Azerbaijan by conducting really independent foreign policy, Ukraine by waging war with Russia. These are conclusions about geopolitics. And just a few words about, a few conclusions about integration. I think Central Asians now, although they are, surely develop consultative meeting mechanism, it's not yet integration, of course. I think now they live in the condition of postponed institutionalization. Without serious, deep, fundamental institutionalization of regional format, integration itself will be postponed, will be weak, will be fragile, and so on. Actually, even on the expert level, academic level even, so far, nobody used seriously the theory of integration. What is integration? How integration is created? What are the stages, the model of integration, and so on? Well, also, last 2 points. I think we are strategic partners. Yes, it's established. We have agreements, treaties on strategic partnership. We have treaty with Kazakhstan on alliance relationships. So I can even raise such questions to be answered, to be discussed. I mean, I will leave them open. Like, are we really strategic partners? Are we really allies? What do we declare on paper? And what do we do in real politics? Because such kind of messages as fraternal relationships, brotherly relationships, we have common space, common history, we are brother nations, sounded since independence, many times. Now they are reflected in specific documents. But at the same time, Central Asians, I think, are facing a dilemma of integration. Dilemma is like this. They do value the regional integration. It's a value indeed. We have to unite. We have to come closer to each other, create a regional integration. But the process itself, so slow. Why it is so slow? Why don't they dare to create institutions of integration? It means, why don't they want to institutionalize the process? I think because three following ideas remain to be discussed. They still are actual and I would say not fully understood and deserve special consideration, special discussion. First is concept of integration. Second is dynamics of integration. And third is model of integration. Concept means what kind of integration we need in terms of whether we will remain on the level what we have today. Cooperation, consultative meetings. Sometimes we meet together. That's it. No more. We don't go beyond this format. So, or do we go to deeper integration like European Union, for instance? This is about concept. Dynamics. How soon shall we integrate? How quickly we should move towards integration? Slowly or with high speed? And finally, what a model we should take. For instance, there are several models of regional integrations in the world, like European Union model, ASEAN model of Southeast Asian nations. In Latin America, they have Mercosur model. North Africa, NAFTA. Well, there is a model of Eurasia, Eurasian Economic Union, or Central Asia. After all, what a model Central Asia should take for deeper integration. I leave these questions open for discussion. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Tolipov, for your detailed overview and analysis of the subject. You made a number of interesting and pertinent arguments. You made the case for the developments of a theory of integration. Thank you for emphasizing on concept of integration, dynamics of integration, and the model of integration. Your insights are invaluable and will definitely help our students understand this important aspect of Central Asia more thoroughly. Now let's take some questions. I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on this statement? Kazakhstan has an integrative identity in Central Asia.
Not only Kazakhstan, all 5 Central Asian countries have integrative identity in Central Asia. Yes, they have such a common identity. Very often, I mean, on the level of conferences, different meetings, and even teaching in universities of Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan and so on, they always reiterate this commonality that five Central Asian countries have common background, common identity, sorry. It's not by accident, by the way, that in the literature, in many textbooks, and of course, academic scholarly articles, you can find that symbolically, these five states are called five stands. Five stands. It means it's also a symbolism. It's also kind of a semiotics that they do have common identity, Kazakhstan including, of course.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tolipov. Could you please explain Kazakhstan's decision to construct its Eurasian identity in 1994?
Yeah, exactly. It's really a controversial page in the history of Kazakhstan and in general of Central Asia, because indeed in 1994, the then Kazakhstani president advanced the idea of Eurasianism and proposed to create the Eurasian Economic Union, custom union, and so on. Some scholars of Kazakhstan at that time even advanced the idea of not only of Eurasian identity of Kazakhs or Kazakhstan, but also European. They had very special strategic program, which is called Path to Europe, by which they meant that they have also European identity, maybe. I discussed with my Kazakh colleagues such a concept of Eurasianism or Europeanism of Kazakhs. I think this idea of Eurasianism of Kazakhstan, although so popular in 1990s, now discredited itself. Now more and more Kazakh experts, I know many of them prominent scholars, political scientists of Kazakhstan now, loudly express their disappointment with the Eurasian Economic Union, that membership of Kazakhstan in the EEU was not so beneficial for Kazakhstan. In this organization, only Russia is a dominant power, and only Russia benefited from its other members just lost. And that's why some Kazakh colleagues of mine, for instance, already raised the question about the possibility of Kazakhstan's withdrawal from Eurasian Economic Union. I know this. And they even propose that Kazakhstan or Kazakhstani authorities should, turn their face towards Central Asia and be more focused on Central Asia than on Eurasia.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tolipov. So what do you think? What implications does the regional integration model have on economic regionalism within the five stands?
Economic integration of five stands, of course, should be a foundation. Every regional integration model begins with economic rapprochement, economic unification, for instance, creation of common economic space, free trade agreements, custom union, and even the monetary union. This is so important because it defines the development and prosperity of nations. That's why economic unification, economic integration should be one of the first requirements of regional integration of five Central Asian countries. But maybe in contrast to other regions of the world, economics should not be the only determinant of regional integration of Central Asian countries. As I said in my presentation, regional integration of Central Asia is hiding, contains either explicit or implicit geopolitical elements and dimensions. That's why geopolitics also matter in this process. Side by side with economic factors and economic dimensions. Coming back to economy again, I should say that among those scholars, my colleagues, and even official circles and media also, there is a kind of a, informal division into skeptics and optimists of regional economic integration. They say I mean, skeptics say that regional economic integration will be successful, efficient only when the members' external trade, the 60 plus, no less than 60% of their external trade is concentrated within the region. If it's not the matter of fact, the integration in the region cannot be stable, cannot be firm, and so on. But I disagree with such an economic reasoning, let's say. Maybe economists can explain better, but I disagree with this. And it depends on the region, its history, its composition, membership, in neighborhood maybe. That's why if even in their foreign trade, Central Asian countries, concentrate less than 50% within the region, and they trade with foreign countries, I mean, extra-regional countries more. This doesn't mean at all that they cannot integrate. For instance, for Uzbekistan, and I'm sure for Kazakhstan and other Central Asian states, Russia is #1 foreign trade partner. Until recently, it was China. So China and Russia are, sharing first and second position in foreign trade of Central Asian countries. But this doesn't mean at all that Central Asian countries should integrate fully with China or with Russia. So that's why economic reasoning, economic arguments should be also, carefully and adequately considered and advanced.
Thank you, Dr. Tolipov. What would be useful to apply the integration process of Central Asian countries in context with the South Asian countries?
There is a widespread, I would say even fashionable approach to Central Asia versus or vis-a-vis South Asia. Some people recently began to argue that Afghanistan is a part of Central Asia. I also fully disagree with this concept. I do not share the idea of Afghanistan being the part of Central Asia. Afghanistan, together with Iran and Pakistan and India, are South Asia, constitute South Asian special region. Central Asia is only five lateral, let's say, five lateral format, five lateral region. And we can talk only about, when we talk about Central Asia and South Asia, their communication, their relationships, we can talk about inter-regional cooperation, but not merger or something like this, or including Afghanistan to Central Asia, or these kind of, modifications of the structure of Central Asia. Central Asian development, prosperity, future development, yes, does depend to a great extent on the overall developments in South Asia. I agree. It's not by accident that, 2 years ago, the conference was on Central Asia, South Asia connectivity, because now all politicians, presidents, analysts understand that Central Asian countries must speed up the process of diversification of their foreign economic and political orientations, especially in the context of war in Ukraine and impossibility or risky character of using Russian territory or overall cooperation with Russia. That's why diversification now is the very important strategic task. And one of the directions of such a diversification of transport corridors is through Caucasus to Europe or southwards through Afghanistan to Indian Ocean. That's why Central Asian countries are now very much interested in the development of such a connectivity between Central Asia and South Asia. But we know that although this is a very attractive project, attractive perspective, we know that it's not easy because of the context of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a turbulent country, unstable, and nobody knows today what will be the perspective of the new government and the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's why South Asian, let's say, structure, South Asian region now remains a bit ambiguous because of Afghanistan.
Thank you for your answer.
If I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much. Moving towards the next question. Regarding People's Republic of China, how do you see the risks and opportunities that the Belt and Road Initiative poses for the Central Asian region?
Yeah, very interesting question. Probably we can ascribe the One Belt and Roads, or Belt and Roads briefly, concept advanced by China to C5, to Chinese version of C5+1. It's like one of the segment of part of this overall global strategy of China with respect to Central Asia within the framework of C5+1. Actually, long before C5+1, China already advanced the Belt and Road Initiative when the Chinese leader Xi Jinping visited Kazakhstan in 2013. It was the first time when he articulated this idea. Since then, more and more projects are proposed by Chinese side, and many conferences were held to discuss the perspectives of Belt and Road Initiative. I can briefly say that there is no resistance, let's say, no rejection of BRI project on the part of Central Asian countries, despite, in some instances, uneasy relationships with China. For instance, debt trap of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are more or less comfortable in this sense. We know that, for instance, India is a little bit critical towards BRI, or Sri Lanka rejecting BRI projects. So there are different approaches, different attitudes to BRI. But regarding Central Asian countries, no rejection, no refusal. They fully accept this proposal, fully support, and even, for instance, during the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summits, very often they articulate and re-articulate the importance of BRI. For instance, in Samarkand, recently in September last year, there was a summit of the SCO. This idea was again articulated. So Central Asian countries are fully positive towards the BRI. The only one thing deserves special consideration and discussion is the following. Some observers in the world, European, American, for instance, scholars, analysts who study regularly the phenomenon of the BRI argue, and I agree to a great extent with such arguments, that the perspectives of BRI, its efficiency and usefulness for Central Asian countries depend on to what extent Chinese side engage local labor force to their projects, to what extent different contracts, agreements, business contracts, commercial contracts are transparent, whether Chinese side, Chinese companies, firms do take into account local legislation, in particular environmental legislation, things like that. So if these kind of factors are clear, or in other words, until and unless they say these factors become clear, we cannot say whether BRI will be so useful, efficient for Central Asia, or it will be only beneficial for China.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your response on the BRI. Continue with the discussion. On China and the C5+1, let me ask, there is a view that China prefers to deal bilaterally with neighbors and to avoid their ability to develop common positions that could counterbalance China's power. How do you think China views the prospect of potential Central Asian regional integration?
Yeah, if you remember, I already said that Chinese policy is ambiguous regarding regionalism in Central Asia. Yes, indeed. When it comes to BRI projects, although it is, propagated, it is advanced as a regional, with respect to Central Asia, as a regional initiative engaging all Central Asian countries. Add to this C5+1 version of China. Actually, in reality, China, realizes all these projects on the bilateral level. Indeed, individually with Kyrgyzstan, individually with Tajikistan or China, and Uzbekistan, they have special package of projects with each Central Asian countries. So again, although it sounds like regional, but in reality, it's bilateral. Um, but if you remember, I said that a kind of symbolical geopolitical arithmetics now is being unfolding in the region. Each global power or regional power has its own version of C5+1. And regarding China, its C5+1 is like is reflected in the formula, in my opinion, of course. 5+1 is equal to X, which is ambiguous, unclear, and maybe it's based on the principle of live and see, because Chinese policy is also, taking into account Russian policy, Russian strategy, the U.S. strategy, and of course Central Asians' own behavior, own orientation. But of course, China deserves special discussion. It's a really very big topic. I mean, Central Asian countries are developing, even on the bilateral level, really very comprehensive cooperation with China. Trade, tourism, education. Thousands and thousands of students are going to China for studying in Chinese universities, which become so attractive for local students from Uzbekistan, tourists, and many other aspects of cooperation now are developed dynamically.
Thank you so much. Next question. Do you think the Afghan Taliban regime can or do impose serious security threats and challenges to Central Asian countries in the medium and long term?
Yes and no, maybe, because depends on how we evaluate the term, the reality of threats. Um, I would use the concept of challenge. Yes, we do have challenge from Afghan side, and not only since Taliban's coming to power in 2021, in August 2021. But long ago, since maybe first period of Taliban's in power since 1996 until 2001, Central Asian countries, and especially countries neighboring Afghanistan, for instance, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, were facing more challenges, I would say, from Afghanistan than now. So maybe my words sound a bit surprising, but that time, the scope of challenges and threats were more dangerous than now. Now, Afghanistan and the Taliban, I mean, second reincarnation of Taliban in Afghanistan, probably as compared to the first term, less threatening towards Central Asia. There are several arguments to say so. For instance, Taliban itself is quite significantly demoralized. What I mean by demoralization, exhausted with the war, and probably they will not tend to launch the new war with Central Asian countries or expand their military actions towards Central Asia, because Central Asia doesn't give any reason for this. Why should Taliban go to Central Asia, whereas their ultimate goal was Afghanistan? They never expressed any intention, any plan to expand beyond Afghanistan. This is one argument. Or second, first it was they are exhausted, they are weaker than the previous time, quite demoralized and tired, and geographically, probably Taliban is purely Afghan phenomenon and without any expansionist motion or intention. And also, Taliban themselves saw in the past that in case of, let's say, with using the modern terminology, in case of emergency, Central Asian countries do cooperate closely with the United States, for instance, in order to strengthen their security, in particular by providing the basic rights. I mean, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan provided their air bases to US forces. From these bases, they conducted operation in Afghanistan. So that's why probably Taliban remembers this story and will never dare to threaten Central Asian countries. But when I say yes, there is a challenge, I mean also the following. In Afghanistan, there are other terrorist and extremist organizations, groups, fighters, which are out of control. Even Taliban, which promised to, let's say, clean the territory, clean control, clean the country from external terrorist organization, extremist groups, and fighters. So far, this is not undertaken. They probably failed to do this, or the overall actions and measures are inefficient. That's why, in this sense, in the sense that there are many other uncontrolled groups operating in Afghanistan, there is some form of challenge to Central Asia.
Thank you for your apt response. A related query is, how do you view the spill-over effects of Taliban ruled Afghanistan, if any, on the Central Asian regional integration process?
Maybe I misunderstood the question. How I see the role of Afghanistan or Taliban
The
on
spillover
regional
effects of
integration?
Taliban. Now, how do you view the spillover effects of Taliban ruled Afghanistan, if any, on the Central Asian regional integration process?
Okay.
Yeah.
Before answering this question, let me remember that long ago, it was approximately in 1995, there was an international regional conference in Tashkent, official conference with the participation of high-ranking officials from Central Asian countries. And among speakers, there was Foreign Minister of Tajikistan, who in his presentation said the following. I very often quote this speech, this conference to my students. He said that regional integration in Central Asia will be postponed or will be inefficient or even fragile because of the factor of Afghanistan. Afghanistan will play, the situation in Afghanistan will play a negative role, negative effect to regional integration in Central Asia. Because Central Asian countries will have to be focused on their own national security, not regional affairs, regional integration or cooperation. That's why these kind of challenges from Afghanistan will be playing a rather a divisive role, disintegrative role than an integrative role. But at the same time, now more stronger understanding is emerging among Central Asians that Central Asian countries must come closer to each other, integrate, in particular to face adequately any challenges from Afghanistan. If they are strategic partners, if they are allies, this implies, among other things, that they help each other in case of threats, in case of, let's say, aggression or incursions of terrorists or different forms of challenges from different directions, not only Afghanistan. So strategic partnership, especially alliance relationships, imply, as I said, among other things, their common actions, common response to different threats from different directions. Whether this will be embodied in their relationships or not is still an open question. But more and more officials and experts today are raising the question about expediency of integration for the sake of security, not only, saying that this process shouldn't be like narrowly interpreted as normative, value-driven, but also strategic, security-driven process. That's why I think the possibility of escalation or spillover, as you said, of the situation in Afghanistan into Central Asian territories should stimulate regional integration, common policy of Central Asian countries, integration, if you want, vis-a-vis Afghanistan. And the last point, unfortunately, today we cannot observe common position of Central Asian countries with respect to the situation in Afghanistan. In particular, Tajikistan doesn't recognize Taliban completely. I mean, no contacts, no recognition, nothing, no cooperation. Uzbekistan, contrary, does keep contacts and even meets with officials of Taliban, even invites Taliban representative to Uzbekistan, to Tashkent for different conferences, meetings, and so on. So Uzbekistan keeps contacts with them and discuss the possibility of railways, construction, railroads, well, avenues and pipelines, and so on. So you see Tajikistan and Uzbekistan differ from each other in terms of how they treat Taliban, how they see cooperation with Taliban. So this is a problematic situation nowadays.
Thank you for an interesting and detailed response. Next question is, which country or countries, in your opinion, could create obstacles for the full regional integration of the 5 Central Asian republics?
Simple question, simple answer. Russia. Russia is not interested in independent integration, unification of 5 states. As I said again, referring to this magic arithmetic formula, geopolitical formula, Russia, has its own solution of this arithmetic. 5 plus 1, Russian version, is equal to 1, which means that it considers Central Asia as part of Eurasian space under Russian umbrella, no more, no less. That's why Russian side, Russian officials, and even experts, I read every day articles from Russian sources, which say that in case of different conflicts in Central Asia, Russia should play the mediation role, that Central Asians cannot survive without support of Russia, without military, strategic, or economic, or other sorts of support from Russia. Central Asia will fully disintegrate without Russian help, and so on. And moreover, geopolitically speaking, Russia should not admit, should not, allow any presence of rivals such as United States or even China or European Union in Central Asia in terms of their dominance or pro-American, pro-Western policy of Central Asians. So Russia tries to do its best in order to prevent such course, such trends on the part of Central Asians. That's why if even Russia or Moscow, the current government of Russia, can admit some form of integration, regional integration of Central Asia, this is possible only, as they say, with Russia, under Russian umbrella. Independent integration of Central Asian countries, of 5 states, is unacceptable for Russia.
Thank you so much. Talking about Russia, our next question is, how does the Central Asian countries view the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war? You can respond to this question from the context of today's discussion, that is from the perspective of regional integration or a common response.
Yes, very important, very serious question. Throughout this year, 2022, public, official circles, media constantly discussed the situation in Ukraine. And, I would even say that the society of our countries, take for instance my country, Uzbekistan, is divided into 2 symbolical camps, let's say. One camp is pro-Russian, support Russian side in this war. Another camp is, let's say, pro-Ukrainian, supporting Ukrainian side, criticizing Russia. You see, even on the level of ordinary people, grassroots level, public opinion, people are, or the societies are deeply divided, deeply divided. There is no, unanimity of positions or perceptions of the war in Ukraine among ordinary people. Another interesting explanation of the situation is related to how Central Asian countries, their representatives voted in the United Nations when there was a voting process last year about this war, and when the question was about blaming Russia for its aggression against Ukraine, and Central Asian countries took rather neutral position, didn't vote at all, probably in order to escape any irritation on the part of Russia. And although everybody understands well, officials, presidents, people, that it's not a good war, Russia, yes, should be blamed. Um, I mean, tacitly, probably everybody understands that Ukraine is a victim, Russia is aggressor, but on the official level, it looks like a neutrality, like a neutrality. So this is how they behave on the international arena. And also, I mentioned this moment in my presentation. Among experts, different critical independent thinkers in Central Asia, there are calls for some measures in order to reduce or prevent Russian influence in Central Asia, at least on the propaganda level. Mass media, television, information space in general of Central Asian countries are overwhelmed with Russian propaganda. So shutting down of Russian propaganda channels on TV, at least, would be one of the measures to reduce such a distortion in public opinion, which is misled with such propaganda. Unfortunately, Central Asian governments doesn't decide so. I mean, doesn't limit the influence of Russian propaganda. Anyway, this is important. Some experts, this another aspect. Some experts were inclined to evaluate the recently established alliance relationships between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan as one of the measures, integrative measures against possible Russian pressure. Probably these alliance relationships, this treaty was kind of a message to Russia or broadly to international community that in case of challenges, in case of threats, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan will stand together, help each other, and resist any possible challenges together. Probably this is again a prototype of real integration of Central Asian countries.
Thank you for your response on the Russia-Ukraine war. Our next question is, do you think that the coming together of the Central Asian republics as a regional bloc through closer cooperation or regional integration would make the global South more inclusive and would contribute to increasing the voice of the Central Asian region? Because as we know, Central Asia has been a venue for greater power politics and is often not well represented.
If I understand correctly the question, integration of Central Asian countries is not for the sake of integration. It's not just a value-driven, like we are brotherly nations, neighbors living together in the same region for centuries, millennium, but it's also a geopolitical action, a geopolitical act. That's why Central Asian countries must integrate, also aiming at raising their voice, common voice on the international arena. Being surrounded by nuclear powers such as China and Russia, Central Asian countries really are fragile, and they're small, they're fragile, weaker. You remember I mentioned the conflicts of a weak state. Yes, they do experience this conflicts. That's why unification, integration could be considered as one of the measures, one of the solutions of this conflicts. By uniting, they will be strong, of course. They will raise their common voice and they will be heard on the international arena. individually, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, when they act individually, be it in the United Nations or elsewhere in the world system, sometimes they can unintentionally give a reason, pretext to critics, to skeptics in the world, especially in the Russian Federation, to say that, you see, Central Asians have different opinions. They also disintegrated, fragmented, so weak. That's why don't think, well, they can integrate. So that's how we can manipulate, we can capitalize on this fragmentation, blah, blah, blah. This is an argument which skeptics or, well, critics or, unfriendly forces from outside the region can use with respect to Central Asia. That's why there is only one way for them, being being surrounded by great powers who themselves are so ambitious, imperial in some aspects. Central Asians cannot even survive, I would say, in front of them without raising common voice, without integration. I mean, common voice, for instance, on the UN platform, OSCE platform, Shanghai Cooperation Organization platform, and elsewhere. Only when they correlate their foreign policy, they can be stronger. And by the way, the idea of correlation of their foreign policy, drafting their common position with respect to key issues world is facing today, is included in joint statements and the treaty which was adopted recently in Cholpanata in Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you so much for your answer. Our next question is, how is Central Asian regional integration related to the balance of powers? What is the logic of hegemony imposed by many in this regard?
I partially highlighted this issue in terms of balance of power, balancing between great powers. It's really a very tough issue. I will give you one very simple example, but there are, of course, many other cases and examples, and the situation is, of course, more sophisticated. But just simplifying the case, let me draft this geopolitical picture. Take triangle. We call it geopolitical triangle. China, Russian Federation, and Russia. Okay, leave others aside. So triangle itself is so sophisticated, and in a sense that the United States on one side, Russia on the other, China on the third side, have three different attitudes towards Central Asia with respect to integration perspective. If we take the United States, for instance, fully supportive of regionalism and regional integration in Central Asia, fully, by even providing some diplomatic, technical, economic assistance in order to promote regional integration in Central Asia. This is reflected in their C5+1 documents and also American strategy on Central Asia, separate document. So fully supportive. European Union, by the way, is also fully supportive of regional integration in Central Asia. And this idea is reflected also in the EU Central Asia strategy. If you take Russia, absolutely no. They, as I said, are fully, against such a perspective, if this perspective doesn't include Russia in this formula. So they see future of Central Asia either fragmented or only under Russian umbrella. It's, as you see, a different posture. China, as I said, have live and see strategy. Actually, even unification, independent unification of Central Asian countries is not threatening China. No challenge to China, no threat to China. If even two Central Asians appear on the map of the world, even two Central Asian unified regions will not be threatening China. So that's why China is not so much concerned about threats or challenges from the unified Central Asia. But at the same time, they probably can see some challenges, some elements of uncertainty, because they themselves have Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in the northern western part of China, the Turkic province, which could be inspired, let's say, by the unity, integration of Central Asian brethren, and that's why separatism in some form can, you know, be activated there. But it's also not so much certain. Even integration of Central Asia probably will not cause any turbulences, disturbances in Xinjiang. That's why for China, it's kind of a live and see, but not so much concerned about integration as such.
Thank you for your interesting response to the question. Talking about regional integration in Central Asia, can you think of a probable time frame to achieve free flow of goods and services in the region, including especially labor force? How will it play out? Are there any structural or institutional or legal challenges involved in this regard?
Yes, Central Asian countries are discussing today the creation of common economic space, drafting different common projects. For instance, I can enumerate a number of examples testifying this. For instance, there are projects which connect not only bigger cities or capitals like Astana, Tashkent, Bishkek, or Dushanbe, but also involve provinces. For instance, Uzbekistan is promoting such a policy of connecting provinces. For instance, southern Kazakhstan and Sirdarya province of Uzbekistan, or Fergana Valley provinces of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. For instance, during the recent visit of Mirziyoyev, state visit to Bishkek, among different documents, one agreement was achieved between Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, which implies that three provinces of Uzbekistan, which are located in the Fergana Valley, they are Andijan, Namangan, and Fergana Valley from Uzbek side, will cooperate locally with provinces from other side of the border. For instance, Namangan with Jalalabad province of Kyrgyzstan, Andijan province with Osh province of Kyrgyzstan, and Fergana province of Uzbekistan with Batken province of Kyrgyzstan. So in a sense that they will simplify border crossing process for local citizens, I mean, without visa, without stamping on passports. They will stimulate creation of joint companies. This is an agreement. They will create more crossing points at the border line for local citizens. Well, with Kazakhstan also, there are similar projects. Let me tell you that despite frozen relations with Tajikistan, I mean, between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, during the first administration period, I mean, during the presidency of Islam Karimov, now the overall trade scale between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan from zero level reached almost $1 billion level. Imagine how it is rapidly developing. Simplification, as I said, of border regime, creation of interprovincial ties, developing of interprovincial ties. It's also a form of connectivity, isn't it? Connectivity we often understand in a mega sense, but on the micro level, like province to province, town to town, village to village, connectivity in Central Asia is also being developed. And the web of networks, web of railroads are constructed, connecting provinces, smaller towns, high-speed trains are running, connecting not only capitals, but also local provincial towns as well. These are just a few signs of connectivity and regional integration, which also reflects that they are moving towards common economic space, social space, political space, and cultural space.
Thank you, Dr. Tolipov. Our next question is, how do you think the reorganization of the Central Asian economic space into the Central Asian Cooperation Organization has changed the dynamics?
This is my idea to And I often, in my interviews, in my articles, and even lectures to students, always propagate, let's say, my idea of reincarnation of the CACO, Central Asian Cooperation Organization. It was a very unfair decision to merge CACO with the Eurasian Economic Community in 2005. Although Eurasian Economic Community doesn't exist, there is only, I mean, another organization, Eurasian Economic Union, where only Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are members, others are not. So it's time to revitalize serious institution. I said in my presentation that without institutionalization, without creation of stronger structures, consultative meetings are not enough. Consultative meetings will not serve the idea of full integration. That's why I said in my presentation that unfortunately still on the academic level, we never applied the stronger theory of integration in terms of model, concept, dynamics of integration, forms of institutions, and so on. That's why reincarnation in some maybe under different name, I don't know, of the CACO, Central Asian Cooperation Organization, could be one bold step forward. But the signs of such a motion already appeared when, as I said, in December 2021, sorry, 22 last year, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan signed a treaty on alliance relationships. The treaty included one provision that Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan create special body, which is called Council of Presidents, Council of Minister of Foreign Affairs, Council of Minister of Defense. This is what should be done when we talk about integration. This is the way the Europeans passed throughout half a century integration period there in Europe by creating councils of presidents, councils of heads of state, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and so on and so on. So between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, we do have such councils already due to this treaty. And I think this should be also a positive sign, let's say, example and a lesson to be taken by other Central Asian countries also. And finally, in the form of CACO or by under other name, such kind of structures should be created. If we think about stronger integration, councils of heads of state of Central Asia, of ministers, common parliaments like European Parliament and others.
Thank you, Dr. Tolipov. With this, I would like to conclude. Thank you, Dr. Farkhad Tolipov, for being here today with us. We had a successful discussion on geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia. We also covered some of the main players in this region and their role in regional integration. Geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia is an important issue as it has an impact on both this region and the world as a whole. Through today's discussion, we were able to come to a better understanding of this issue. I personally enjoyed our discussion today, and I feel confident that I've gained valuable insights into this topic. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who attended today's talk. I'm sure you all had a great learning experience. I really appreciate your time with us today, Dr. Farkhad Tolipov. We hope to see you again, and I look forward to our next session of the Exploring Central Asia Talk series. Thank you once again, everyone. I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, for listening to my presentation, and very interesting, very serious questions. Thank you very much.
I take this opportunity to formally conclude this fantastic session on geopolitics and regional integration in Central Asia as a part of the Exploring Central Asia Talk series organized by the Tillotoma Foundation. I especially thank Dr. Farkhad Tolipov, visiting Senior Fellow of Central Asia of the Tillotoma Foundation and Director of Bilim Karvoni, Uzbekistan, for his insightful address. I also sincerely thank Dr. Kamakshi Wason, Chief Operating Officer and Director of Academic Programs, Tillotoma Foundation, for her presence as the chair of this session. We had an excellent discussion at this special session on diverse dimensions of the subject. Thank you all for joining. Looking forward to hosting you for the subsequent talks of the Exploring Central Asia Talk series organized by the Tillotoma Foundation.